Welcome back. Today I have the great pleasure of introducing you to a friend of mine named Alejandro, and he's going to share his story of survival from his wife's infidelity. I say this all the time. There are nuances to the betrayed male's journey, just like there are nuances to the betrayed female's journey. However, Alejandro is able to piece together a few things. Number one, even if you are a betrayed female, you're going to find some great truth, some great courage and passion for life in Alejandro's story. If you are a betrayed male, you're going to find incredible relevance to your journey. You'll find some great tips, some great suggestions, and you'll just hear a great story of how he's been able to overcome the betrayal that he's had to walk through and where he's at now in life. I hope and pray that this interview encourages you. I will warn you, it's a Zoom interview, but the quality of the interview is fantastic. Whether you're unfaithful or betrayed, whether you're male or female, I assure you, there are great nuggets of truth and comfort and healing within Alejandro's story. Thank you so much for tuning in. I hope you find this interview to be as encouraging as I did. Alejandro, thank you for joining us today. I'm so excited about you coming in and sharing your story.
Good to be here, Samuel.
You know, in the middle of this coronavirus, it's been really hard to do any interviews in the studio. So I'm in the studio now. I just appreciate your willingness to join via Zoom. And I did a video intro before I joined you on Zoom. And you're a betrayed male spouse. You've got a story of great courage. Hearing it, I'm just really so proud of you and your courage to go forward despite things not going probably the way that you would have hoped. And so, number one, I'm so thrilled that you've come in. Number two, you know, the betrayed male spouse is a unique community that really only likes to hear from people who've been through it, because the betrayed male world is different, right? I mean, it has some unique nuances to it, and you know that, and you're going to share that. So if you would, why don't you take a couple of minutes and give the viewers a bit of a timeline for what's gone on and, of course, where you're at now. I just want to get out of the way because I think you're going to really encourage so many people all over the world.
Sure. Well, thanks, Samuel. Yeah, let me just jump right in. I think guys appreciate that too. The directness is, I was married at the time for 14 years, had 2 kids at the time when my wife had her first affair. This was, we're talking late 2015. My ex-wife had been in the military, specifically in the Air Force, where they have temporary duty travel, TDYs. And it's interesting that the joke was always, what goes TDY stays TDY. And we used to laugh about that. But what happened is on one of these trips is when the affair happened. Now, like many affairs, it was unbeknownst to me. When she came back, she appeared somewhat different. She did share that she had spent some time sharing some personal things about life with someone else there because it was lonely and there was no one to talk to. And she left it at that. Obviously, I was a little concerned. At that point, our marriage had been going through some tough times. Many people can relate to this, many guys. We had 2 young children, one a little over 6, 7 years old, another one under 5. A lot of the pressures of having to provide for a family, that was one of my main goals. She was staying home, so I was just working on trying to kill and eat. So our marriage had suffered a little bit from our personal connection because we were so focused on the kids. So there was probably an area of vulnerability there. So when that happened, I said, well, let's start doing something. Let's get some help. Maybe let's get some counseling. Again, I didn't think it was a full-fledged affair at the time.
Right.
But things still remain kind of iffy. Later that year, this is about 6 months later, she planned a trip to California. And again, unbeknownst to me, I just thought it was just kind of some time to get away. And that's when she actually had a meetup with this person again, the affair partner, and continued that. I didn't find out until she returned. It was like we see a lot of trickle drip truth. There were things that were popping up, and I had just a premonition of looking up some phone records.
Mm.
And that's how I found out. And then I found communications, which was very explicit. So that was, I have written in a diary that probably the worst day of my life as far as the pain that I
Absolutely.
felt. And that continued for that feeling for about another month. She had another TDY, another trip that she was going to make. I was very apprehensive, and I asked her not to go. She said, well, I can't do anything about it. She went on that trip. She came back and she said, there may be some rumors about things that you might hear, but don't listen to that. People are just, they make stuff up. And that was kind of interesting. Then she kept bringing up the name of this person that I should meet. All these things that seem kind of weird. I think that's one of the things that we see in affair recovery is things are not the same. And sometimes you have a feeling. So to wrap this up, another affair had happened there. I found out about it again later and then worked through the next 2.5 to 3 years trying to save the marriage. Other affairs happened, but for brevity, I'll just say that my marriage did not survive. But in all of the affairs, I had to find out till eventually I had to make a choice and I had to move on, but certainly had to deal through multiple of those experiences, which for any guy are extremely painful and heartbreaking.
Absolutely. And you said 2.5 to 3 years. I mean, some people, they think, well, we should know in 6 months, right? And they're really hard on themselves. Or they think, okay, about a year. And you just said 2.5 to 3 years. You labored through, tell me a little bit more what that was like. Tell the viewer, because that's a long time to work on trying to save the marriage, right? Some people will say, oh, I'll give it 6 months and we'll see what happens. But you gave it 2.5 and 3 years. Are you sorry that you gave it that long? Do you feel like you needed that? Tell me more about that.
Hindsight is 2020. I think that's one of the things that we can learn. And anybody that's going through this, there's no right way. Everyone has our journey. As I look back, as an armchair quarterback, as they say, I probably could have cut that time in half, but those experiences make me who I am now and give me the learning and experience that I have and maybe appreciation. And for me, as a person who subscribes to faith, it has led to my spiritual growth. But there were signs that I wasn't paying attention to. And one of the things I say is that probably the reason it took so long is because I was in denial. And one of the most powerful lessons that I got from this experience was to really embrace what the reality is. Well, not just some kind of hope or some kind of vision, but embrace the reality, then see how it aligns to maybe hope and vision you have.
So would you say, it sounds to me, we didn't talk much about this off camera, but it sounds to me that you were kind of like maybe hoping that things would turn around. Did you find yourself ignoring like the red flags? Like, no,
Yes.
Maybe talk more about that, because that seems to be a very common denominator in the betrayed spouse world. But certainly even it can be more so in the betrayed male, because you don't necessarily want to believe that, right?
Yeah. One of the key things for me is in learning about even your own development and thinking is that, remember, we live in these ideals that we create for ourselves. What we envision, we live in these daydreams sometimes, or what we envision that we want in life. And we get used to it. Now, when that reality is taken away, and that could be the reality is that maybe you have magical thinking. Many times we have magical thinking. So you're not in reality, but guess what? It feels so good that you just stay there and deny the truth. And you tell yourself other things. And some things like escapism work for us. Maybe you binge on TV, or maybe you overwork, or maybe you go to a strip club. Depending on where you are in the spectrum, you use something to keep that. So for me, when that reality was taken, you got to remember that my mentality, and again, given that I come from a background of faith, my wife having an affair was not something that was possible. I thought that I thought that I would see an alien before I could believe that my wife had an affair. That's how remote the possibility was. So when it happened, it totally rocked me. It was like an atomic bomb, and then it just rearranged all the furniture. Heck, it was like a tornado, took it
Yeah,
all away.
absolutely.
I was trying to put everything back, not
Mm.
realizing that the tornado took everything away. I'm still thinking, okay, let me put everything back. I wanted to have that reality back, and it was futile. There was no way that I could do that.
And I think so many betrayeds feel the same way, right? Like you kind of you kind of put it out of your mind and hope that things will, you called it magical thinking, I call it, so many think that things will magically get better, and most of the
Yeah.
time they don't. In fact, they get worse. What do you think kind of woke you up? And I know you just said it beautifully. It was like a tornado, emotionally, mentally, spiritually, psychologically. What kind of finally made you go, okay, like Rick says this, our founder
Mhm.
says, until you can accept where you're at, you'll never get to where
That's
you
right.
are either wanting to go or could
Yes.
go or need to go. But
Mhm.
for you, what kind of made you finally go, okay, I got to accept it?
Well, one of the things is that it kept happening.
Yeah.
So while I wanted to see something else, and one of the things we learn in recovery and in healing is that you have to own your own recovery and they have to own theirs. And even if you work in business, I work in business and I coach leaders on this, that guess what? Someone is going to want to have to, or they're going to want to do or excel in their job. You can't do that for them. Now, you can see what motivates them and provide the environment for them to do that. But at the end of the day, they have to own that development for themselves.
Right.
How well you know them helps them to have an environment where they can thrive. Now, in my situation, I kept wanting to see her own it. And when she didn't own it, I was a little apprehensive, or I think I suffered with codependency, meaning that I could not be happy
Mm.
until she did the work.
Yeah.
And unless she behaved a certain way that met my expectations. So after a certain amount of time and resources like the ones you all provide, some close friends, I think that's another key point for me. I had two key guys that walked with me along the way that would really walk me off the ledge a lot of times,
Yeah.
and that asked me questions. They didn't necessarily give me advice, but they would ask me questions. Because remember, I went through Harboring Hope at that first year. So then you're talking about another 2 years after that. The stuff was, I was rereading the book, going back to it. And one of the things I kept going back to was, well, am I expecting something different to happen?
Mm.
And am I trying to own her recovery? And for me, because I subscribe to faith, am I trusting God with her? Now, when I kept seeing patterns, and it's something you told me because we had a meeting that early on, you said, behavior is one thing, it happens here and there, but if it keeps repeating, that might be a pattern. And I remember
Yeah.
you told me that. So when I started seeing the pattern, and again, embracing the reality that maybe she doesn't want to stay in this relationship and maybe can't communicate it any other way. That's the other piece. Sometimes we learn that people can't communicate things, and maybe acting out is her way to communicate. But when I kept seeing 3 affairs, 4, then I had a feeling that maybe this is not healthy. And I
Yeah.
had the maturity through that point. But maybe the point, maybe you can ask me about this. What prevented me from doing it, though, was I was married to the idea that I could save my marriage. So I was afraid that if what's going to happen if I can't save it? I was so afraid of that's what kept me in that bondage, or as a prisoner, as a victim. I was victimizing myself, like, oh, I'm going to be divorced, my family's going to be this. I kept making up these scenarios in my mind that were full of fear, that couldn't allow for me to see, well, maybe things could be different.
And so in hearing that, there's so many people that watch my videos who go to our website who are divorced. And, I've been trying to get, I'll just applaud you for a minute because people don't understand, right? They'll say, Samuel, bring people in with this story and that story. And I say, I don't know if you know how scary it is to have your face in front of hundreds and thousands of people and tell the most gruesome story of your life. So again, I applaud you having the courage to do this, because it's going to help so many people. And being divorced in light of what has happened, you alluded to it. What finally, maybe it was a pattern, maybe it was just kind of a reckoning, but even you had said, you had all these scenarios and you were at some level afraid to do it. What brought you to the point where you said, look, I just, this is the choice I have to make? Because I think so many men, but even betrayed spouses, get in this situation of, look, like I kind of know what I need to do, or I feel like I know what I need to do, but I'm scared to death. Like I just am terrified. I don't know how to do this. What worked for you?
As far as what helped me make the decision,
Yeah,
inevitably?
yeah,
Yeah. Well, I would say maybe a couple of things. One thing is, while I'm a proponent of marriage, and still to this day, I still believe
sure.
that is our first, we should do whatever it takes to save that marriage. I still think that's the best way. However, that is not the case for everyone as far
Yeah,
as the final outcome. So for me, it was getting out of the emotional whirlwind of drafting up stories in my mind of gloom and doom,
mm,
and maybe looking at all of the negative situations where divorce has wrecked marriages,
yeah,
and maybe looking at people who have done it and who have thrived. Because remember, it's something called the focus illusion, and this is a concept that really helped me, is that nothing, here's the quote, it says, nothing is as important as you think it is while you're thinking about it.
hmm,
Nothing in life is as important as you think it is while you're thinking about it. If you're thinking about it, if I'm thinking about divorce, I make it to be this big thing. And when I started doing some cognitive exercises where I started writing down, what's the worst case scenario?
mm,
Worst case scenario is I'll be damaged goods, can never get married again. My kids will go homeless. Nobody will talk to me. Some crazy, really bad scenario. I'll be broke the rest of my life. I'll be homeless. And then you look at, well, what's the best thing that can happen? And typically it's somewhere in between there.
yeah,
But there are countless people, that's the other thing, is you have to look at the data, who have survived this situation and have thrived on the other side, but it does require effort and it requires work. So for me, it was certainly that cognitive exercise of getting out of my mind, really looking at running the traps, as they say in business. The other piece was, again, as a believer, as a Christian, I felt peace from God actually releasing me. They say God is not into divorce. People quote the Bible. I think it's in Habakkuk or Malachi. I think it's Malachi. But God does not like divorce, but he doesn't like abuse either.
yeah,
And he
exactly.
doesn't like deception and lies. And staying in that kind of a relationship was unhealthy. So between those two things, I knew that I would have to make that choice.
And I think you said it really well. I say it this way, Bible says God hates divorce. He doesn't hate divorcees. And
Yes.
not every marriage maybe should be saved. When there's abuse, when there is violence that
Mm-hmm.
just cannot be redeemed, when there is obviously circumstances. Listen, whether you come from faith or you don't, or a different type of faith,
Mm-hmm.
there's just the reality that what you tolerate, you cannot change. And as long as you tolerate that abuse, there comes a point where you have to say, look, I can't look myself in the mirror anymore,
Yeah.
turning a blind eye to the abuse that's
Yeah.
happening to me. And so for you, as a man who was betrayed, did you struggle? We didn't talk about this either, but you're on such a good roll. Did you struggle with, most betrayed men will deal with embarrassment, that comparison stuff,
Oh, come on,
that
man.
that inadequacy, that feeling of humiliation, like this isn't supposed to happen to men, right? The
Yeah.
societal norms would say this only happens to women. So
Mm-hmm.
can you talk a little bit about that, but can you talk about how you were able to heal from that and move through that? Because I think men all over the world need help with that.
I'm glad you brought that up, because that is the point that I believe, and you see in many cases, is unique to men. And something that I had written is that for infidelity for men, it's almost like an emasculation. I think I've
Hmm.
heard you say it. It's an emasculation. I think the other guy you had on said you feel like you're reduced to ashes. I love that term because it feels like your whole manhood is taken away, and that's how society has cultured us, if you will, or just said, hey, a guy, you handle your business, man. And I say guys have this, I got this itis. That's our disease. I got this itis. Because
Right.
you feel like you can handle everything, man. And guess what? Oh, I'm dealing with this, I'm dealing with that, no problem. But when this comes, it's when you think about somebody sleeping with your wife, even from the earliest days, I came up with hip hop
Mm.
in the glory era of hip hop. And all the hip hop braggadocio was like, watch your girl while I'm around, like I'll steal your girl. Because that was the ultimate insult is if I got your girl. So you couch that with infidelity. And I mean, man, you feel so reduced. So I would say that was one of the biggest challenges because you feel like you're just not man enough. And I remember that conversation and doubting myself. For many of us, I would say that's the first thing we do is we blame ourselves. Man, I guess I just couldn't handle my business. And think about it, how many different ways. Maybe I couldn't provide financially. Maybe I couldn't provide sexually. Maybe I couldn't provide emotionally. Maybe I couldn't provide intellectually. Maybe I couldn't provide. You'll think of so many scenarios, and that's what kept going through my mind. And to be honest with you, it took a while.
Yeah.
What helped me was, again, is getting back to the resources and really thinking about, well, what is truth? Because we have to embrace what the reality is. The reality is that, hey, I was not like any other guy out there. Any husband out there can tell you it's an everyday struggle. You've shared it through your post. No guy is perfect. In any marriage, there's always going to be work. So, but guess what? I had been married for several years and had a family, had maintained a home. I hadn't done abusive behavior, unproductive behavior. I was taking care, I was responsible. So one of the things is, wait a second, I have held gainful employment. I do have responsibility in my community. I do have a good number of friends. A lot of people think that I'm someone worthy to be connected to. So when you look at that and understand, well, wait a second, maybe I'm not terrible after all. Sure, there's some things I can work with and I can grow every day. But that reality helped me to escape. And then, again, understanding what God thinks of me. When I go to the scriptures and I see what God thinks of me and that he sent, for example, made provision for me through, as a Christian, I believe through Jesus to die for my sins. I have to think of that and say, I must be worth something. And
Right.
even if you don't believe in God or spirituality, I would say that every human life has value. We're all a work in progress. So for me, it was a process of getting away from the lie, changing my thinking, and saying, no, I am a good friend. Or no, I can provide, but always saying I'm a work in progress. I'm still going to get better, but I'm not some down and out loser and less than a man. That's not true. And that's the key, is changing that inner dialogue in your mind, because your thoughts create your behavior. Your thoughts create emotion, which then create your behavior. So the more you can control the thoughts, then the more you can determine the emotions and then the behavior that will play out from that pathway.
Man, it's so good. Let's go get in the gym, dude. Like, I feel so encouraged. It's so much, like power listening to you talk because you're a survivor. And
But see, look, let me say something though, that
bring it.
It requires that. I think that's the piece that, as guys, sometimes we think I'm just going to will this into being, and it doesn't happen from one day to the next. We're talking 2 days forward, one step backward.
Yeah.
One day, I'm a Charles Atlas of fair recovery. The next day, I'm in the fetal position, sobbing like a freaking baby,
Yes.
and wanting
Yes.
to kill myself, literally. So, but as you progress is the resilience and the hope. I think that's what A&R brought to me is I saw people on the other side of the fence, on the other side of the tunnel that said, brother, there is light at the end of it. And I know it's hard right now. And that's the other piece of acceptance. This is not tiddlywinks, man. This is not going to be, oh yeah, I'm doing great. Some days you're going to want to kill yourself. But for me, it was the hope of, there are people on the other side and they've gotten there. So it's what Winston Churchill said, if you find yourself going through hell, keep going.
Right. And I think, man, I just, the courage and the resilience that you're talking about is necessary for a man or a woman. It's absolutely essential if you're going to make it out of the pit of hell. For those that are unfaithful, I mean, if you want to heal, if you want to reclaim your heart, you're going to have that same resilience. You're going to have that same bravery to face it. And so what I want to ask you now, because I think you've already shared so much that I think is incredibly powerful. And so this sets the stage to bring you back in and we'll just talk about another topic. But talk about life now, right? Like there's such a fear of divorce. There's such okay, if we divorce, I have failed and that life is over. Now, people that are experts in divorce will tell you it is like a death to a certain extent. It's a death of a relationship. I get that. But as someone who has had to face down what so many are running from, not necessarily their denial, but some of them are in denial. Some of them are just like, man, I don't want to have to do that. Talk about life now. Talk about how you live now, just from your children to career to holding your head up high to what you face. I mean, talk about it, what life looks like now.
Yeah, it's all about perspective, Samuel, and understanding that, again, how you choose to see it is what will drive how you experience it. It's what we focus on expands. So again, you have to also embrace the reality. It's an amputation. Like you said, that's the way that I like to see divorce. It's an amputation. In amputation, there's blood. It's not pretty. Sometimes it's not an even cut. And there are a lot of parts that deal with that recovery. So to say that, it's puppy dogs and candy canes, that's not true. However, what I can tell you is when an amputation happens, typically if it's gangrene or something, that body part was no longer functional. That's why it had to be cut off. So there was a purpose for it. And what ends up happening is you end up adapting the rest of your body in ways that you didn't use before because you had use of that limb. So in like fashion, in a divorce, it's now adapting using other things that you didn't think about before, because guess what? You had that other piece. So when you think of children, for me, I have 2 young kids, different households. My ex-wife is now with her last affair partner. They've been together for the past year and a half or so, and I think they plan to get married. So there's a different influence, a different worldview, if you will, that they have over there and that I have when they're with me. So we share the custody, but I focus on what I can do when they're with me. I can't control what's going on over there. I can try to work with her as much as I can as far as certain things that we're in agreement on, as far as education and certain behavioral issues, but faith or other things, we have different beliefs. So for me, it's been one of those things, Samuel, of entering into a different relationship with my ex-wife. And having something in common helps me to have better conversations and to deal with the forgiveness. Because that's a different piece too. If you can't forgive, you can't move forward. So now it's interesting that I'm able to have productive conversations with her about something that we have mutually in common. As far as the peace that I have, I can tell you that I go to sleep now so peacefully. And that inner peace, it's hard to describe because when you're in the throes of infidelity, it's just so difficult. You feel like this weight that is on you. You can't even think straight at times. And it's almost like you have to come up to breathe because you feel like you're being suffocated and you're anxious. Your stomach is up in knots. I can tell you that I don't have any of that anymore. And that the new opportunities that have been presented to me as far as community involvement, friendships, the ability to talk to other men now that are going through this. My career has really thrived right now because I can have focus. My mind is not necessarily in all these different places, and I can use what I've learned. It's interesting that I use my personal experiences through infidelity in corporate trainings. When I share this, and people can relate to it maybe in different ways, but this experience has now helped me and has become a building material for my life and in the benefit of others. And when
That's
that
awesome.
happens, it brings a joy that I never thought was possible. And I can say that, you know what, that experience has brought me something that I value now.
I think you hit the nail right on the head, right? Is that it's an amputation. And some people choose to remarry. Some people, take a long season. Some
Mm-hmm.
people never remarry. There's no wrong answer, right? It's what fits for them. But I think I feel like you have handed this big cup of hope and courage to people that are just, it's understandable to be terrified.
Mm.
And I'm working on another interview with a betrayed female to come in who's also divorced. And, she's helped me understand a lot too, is there's so much that is just different, right? And that's why I don't talk an enormous amount about that, because I don't want to try and make people think, oh, I know what it's like. Listen, the reason the Affair Recovery website is so powerful is because we've been through it. We get it. But
Right.
it's also because people like you come in and give back and decide to say, look, I'm willing to share my story for people all over the globe to just move the football down the recovery field a little bit at a time,
Yeah.
When the virus is over and the doors are back open, you're coming in the studio, brother. It's going to be
Oh,
fantastic. Well,
I'm looking
there's
forward
always
to
something to talk about.
it. Absolutely, man. There's a lot in there, and I appreciate the opportunity. I like what you mentioned there. I remember John Haney. He was a huge hero for me because I could relate to him. So I remember just his videos, or when I went to the conference. I think I went in 2018. I think I went to the conference in Austin. Had a chance to meet him. And I think the other gentleman you had on, he said the betrayed male is almost like the Yeti, like like Bigfoot, because we don't see him. But I feel like I'm okay showing my face. I'm okay telling my story because many people out there need to associate or need to see that there is light at the end of the tunnel. And on those difficult days, when you feel that you can't make it, just having that one breath, I always call it, or maybe that one sip that gets you through. And it could be a video like this or a nugget like this that gets you through that one day. Because sometimes that's all you need, brother, is just to get through the next hour sometimes.
That's
And hopefully
exactly right.
this can help that way.
Brother, listen, I can't thank you enough. I know people all over the world, and if you're watching, I would love for you to drop a comment of just maybe a word of thanks to Alejandro on YouTube or Fair Recovery, or all the different platforms. We would love for you to leave a comment, maybe of thanks. Maybe you have a question that we didn't talk about. If I don't know the answer, I'll get you the answer. But it's so important, especially as we're coming slowly out of this quarantine where isolation, it's just miserable. And so I hope that this video has helped you. If you need help, reach out to us. You can leave a comment here. You can email support@hope-now.com. Once again, that's support@hope-now.com. Listen, don't be alone. You don't need to be alone. We want to do everything we can to help. So Alejandro, thank you for coming in, brother.
My pleasure, Samuel. Have a good one.